Welcome back, everyone, to Elle and Max Are Stuck in the Upside Down. This is episode 5, and we called it Family Matters. The topic about custody, family court, agencies surrounding families and children have caused years of distrust, long-lasting damage, and a divide among families, an ever-long period of injustice. Joyce Byers in Stranger Things has her fair share of challenges as a single mother of 2 boys. One who goes missing, and in a desperate search for Will, she's forced to ask their deadbeat dad for help. No sooner does she realize that seeking his help brings her more trouble than it's worth. Lonnie was emotionally abusive towards both Will and Jonathan, and when Will goes missing and is presumed dead, Lonnie tries to convince Joyce that they can reunite and share the money from a wrongful death lawsuit.
In an episode that is shedding light on these issues that everyone is not only talking about, but are literally sitting on both sides of the case, and also finding common issues with some of the key players, including the children.
So most recently, The Nightmare Upstairs, What Happened to Ty and Bryn, is a 2-part Hulu documentary about siblings Ty and Bryn Larson. Ty and Bryn barricaded themselves in an upstairs bedroom for 54 days in Utah to avoid being forced into court-ordered reunification program with their father during a long custody battle. This show premiered on May 19th, 2026.
What is it about? The children had accused their father, Brent Larson, of sexual and emotional abuse, which he has denied. The daughter, Bryn, who was 7 at the time, was found by her mother applying lotion to her bottom. Her mother asked what she was doing, and she replied that her father showed her how to do it. When asked about this later, Brent said if he ever put lotion on her down there, it was because she had a rash and he used A&D ointment.
Brinley, prior to this, had never reported inappropriate touching. Brinley's mother, her name is Jessica, called DCF and her lawyer immediately. It's unsure, I guess, from the documentary if she called the doctors, but it doesn't seem like she did. It seemed like she called DCF and her lawyer right away. DCF did decide that these allegations would be supported. So for those of you who don't know much about DCF takes, calls from people reporting child abuse and neglect. It's called the 51A. They investigate, and then based on their investigation, they can open the case, which would be supported. They can close it, which would be unsupported, or they can also close it but offer support. So what they would do is the family wouldn't have an open DCF case, but they would get some supports from DCF, whatever that might look like. So DCF did decide that the allegations would be supported. They arranged for supervised visitations for Ty and for Brinley with their dad. So later on, during one of these supervised visits, Ty, who was 10 at the time, also reported abuse. Ty was recorded during one of these visits confronting his father about that he did not want to see him during the visits and that he felt unsafe being around his father, but that he was there to protect Brinley. He later told his mother and also his therapist, who his mother had set up for him, that his father had inappropriately touched him early in his childhood years during a bath and also while he was going to bed.
Seems like we're missing some really important facts here to support these statements, but let's go on. Ty also alleged that his father was emotionally abusive towards him. Their mother, Jessica, I cannot pronounce her last name, fought custody orders in court, and a judge had ordered, and I honestly have never heard of this before, a reunification therapy camp. The kids resisted by barricading themselves upstairs in their rooms and created a live stream on TikTok. The judge also ordered law enforcement to use reasonable force to detain the kids and force them to visit with their father. The police did attempt to withdraw the kids, but after seeing how adamant the kids were about refusing to leave their rooms and go to the visitation, they backed down.
So the father later on withdrew his parental rights. This was years. I think they said 6 years or 8 years later. He claims his innocence now, and he still did during this whole time. The whole court process caused him to lose his home, his job, his kids, obviously. And he was also divorced from his second wife during this time. The whole custody battle was around 6 years. So Bren's mother did appear on the documentary on Netflix. She was very supportive of her son, and had complete distrust for the kid's mother, Jessica, and never wavered on her belief that her son was innocent. The case became national news and sparked a lot of debate around, family court decisions, how allegations for abuse are handled. And again, this controversial use of parental alienation that they mentioned many times during this documentary, and how that relates to custody disputes.
Yeah, and the courts never had proof that the mother did provide, mind tricks to get the kids to say things that weren't true, or that the mother was trying to prevent the children from going to their visitation with their father. The documentary uses real footage from the barricade, real family interviews, and court context to show how the situation escalated and what happened afterward. Reviewers are calling it pretty intense and emotional because it focuses on how family court systems can fail kids that are caught in these disputes, even if this is not based on real facts.
This case this case may have made headlines across social media, but has little consequences to a few other cases that we're going to talk about in a minute that have taken place over the last 10 years. So just to kind of go back a little bit around, just to kind of wrap up the documentary with these kids, I think, like Elle said, there was a lot left out of this documentary. I feel like it's really hard as an outsider to really make an educated determination about what could have happened. Because like you said, Elle, like they really left out that piece of, like, they mention the parental alienation, but they don't really give you an examples of it, or like they didn't really say like, oh, mom did X, Y, and Z, which is, an example of parental. Like they didn't really have any like straight facts to show that. So I think there was definitely a lot left out of that case.
And yet these professionals were making these knee-jerk reactions or presumptions anyways. That professional that worked with the courts about the reunification, she basically was coming out and saying, well, the mother had to have said this, the mother had to have done this, but there was nothing to support it. So as much as I'm not sure what happened here, I definitely need more information.
Yeah, me too. And I agree with you. I had never heard of this reunification camp. I'm in the human services field, so I feel like I'm pretty knowledgeable on those kind of treatments and different things that they offer, especially for the youth. And that's something that I have to say I have not heard of. I don't know if that's something that's more in the Midwest, but I feel like in New England, that's not something that I've ever heard of.
Yeah, and at least the minimal amount of footage they showed of taking other kids to these camps unwillingly. If this is about the children, then why are they so hyper focused on the father's rights? Not that agree with them taking away, the kids from their father. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, based on the lack of information that we have, I do not by any means think it's appropriate for them to restrain children and put them in the back of a van or a police car and take them somewhere where they claim they're not comfortable, and then a 90-day period where they cannot talk to their mother. They should have just done supervised visits with the mother if they thought that the mother was putting stuff in the kids' ears.
Yeah, I don't understand the whole concept either. And I feel like, what are they really getting from this camp if the children don't want to be there? how much are they really, like, what kind of interaction, I guess quality, we'll say, like, quality interactions are they really gonna have?
Yeah, and someone said to me, "Well, why doesn't the court appoint a neutral therapist because they thought that Ty's therapist was biased?" Well, why didn't they? Because the one that they had appointed just assumed mom was filling these kids' ears with stuff that wasn't true. So, is there really ever going to be a neutral um court appointed liaison in these situations?
Yeah, we kinda talked about liaisons last time, and that's a good point. Like, I'm kinda wondering again, I feel like that's something they could have left out in this documentary. Like, I'm wondering, did the kids have a liaison? They didn't mention it during this documentary, but again, like we talked about, I think the last episode, is that's often common. So, and I feel like this would be one of those perfect cases where they would have a liaison that would, be there to support the kids and maybe get more information from the kids.
Right, exactly.
So let's talk for a second about a few other cases that have taken place over the past 10 years. And again, we kind of stuck with the New England area since that's, the area around us. So the case of Harmony Montgomery, which I know most of you, if you are from the New England area, have heard about her. So Harmony was a 5-year-old girl from Manchester, New Hampshire. And this case became one of the most disturbing child care welfare cases in New England. It was really sad.
Yeah, in 2019, Harmony was placed in the custody of her father, Adam Montgomery. Despite his violent criminal history and past concerns of abuse, witnesses later reported seeing Harmony with a black eye, and family members said Adam admitted he had bashed her around. Reports were made to child welfare authorities, but no effective intervention happened.
So prosecutors said that Adam killed Harmony in December 2019 after violently beating her while the family was living in a car. Her body was hidden for months and then later disposed of. Her remains still have not been found to this day. She was not reported missing until late 2021, nearly 2 years later, when her mother, Crystal Sorey, realized she had been cut off from contact and she called the police.
In 2024, Adam Montgomery was convicted of second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, falsifying evidence, and other related charges. He is serving 56 years to life in prison. And recently, this year actually, a New Hampshire judge ordered Adam to pay $15.5 million to Harmony's estate in a wrongful death judgment brought by her mother. While he is unlikely to ever pay it, the ruling formally holds him civilly responsible in Harmony's death.
Really, I can't even believe this. So, a few reasons why this case matters. Harmony's death triggered major scrutiny of Massachusetts family court decisions, New Hampshire's child protective services and their failures, the interstate custody oversight problems, which I, in my job, have had firsthand with that specifically. So Harmony's story is still discussed widely. It's one of those cases that really haunts people because there was so many warning signs that were there and multiple people failed this poor little girl.
Multiple people, and including the mother. And one of the questions I was looking into while we were talking about this earlier is that Harmony's mother, Crystal, did not have regular custody or consistent contact with Harmony after Harmony was placed with her father in 2019. To me, as a mother, I have no idea how this is even possible.
Yeah, I did do some research a while back. I can't remember. They had, I think she had maybe some addiction problems. But what happened was custody was awarded to Adam, even though there were concerns about his criminal history and instability. Crystal had been dealing with her own struggles at the time and, like Elle said, lost custody. So after Harmony went to live with Adam in New Hampshire, Crystal's contact became really inconsistent. Adam reportedly blocked her or limited communication, and even like would give excuses why Harmony couldn't talk and really just cut her off.
Crystal had said she was told that Harmony was with relatives or otherwise unavailable, and because custody was legally with Adam, she had limited power to force contact immediately. And then over time, Crystal became increasingly suspicious and repeatedly tried to get answers. And then in late 2021, when she could no longer get any proof of that Harmony was alive or be able to speak to her, she contacted the police and reported Harmony missing.
So by this time, Harmony had already been dead, or prosecutors say that Harmony had been dead for nearly 2 years. This case got a lot of public criticism focused on why state agencies and courts didn't catch this earlier. There were multiple warning signs. There were reports of abuse, including Harmony being seen with a black eye. There was missed welfare checks, poor follow-up, school non-attendance concerns, interstate failures between Mass and New Hampshire welfare systems. Again, like Dad had a record as well, so I feel like there should have been extra checks and things in place, and they just really failed her.
Yeah, and again, like I said, we don't always have all the information about these cases, and even though the mom had some issues, if she repeatedly tried to gain contact, she must have known about Adam's history with abuse. I just, as a mom, even if I got my rights taken away from me, that would be the primary concern. If the court gave my daughter to the man that was abusing her, I would want proof. Every single time I tried to call, I would want proof. And if I didn't get proof that she was being taken care of, then I'd take them back to court. So I
Yeah, I guess
really,
I wonder why she waited so long. She didn't report her missing for 2 years. Like, I don't know that as a mother in any capacity I would wait that long.
no. To me, it's really hard to feel empathy for any parent, the dad or the mother. And then where's the rest of the family? Why aren't they saying anything? To me, this is very disturbing. Which brings us to our next disturbing case here in New England. 7-month-old Aiden Marino, did I say that right? Marino, yeah, was killed in 2015 after his father threw him off of the Aragoni Bridge in Middletown, Connecticut. Assistant Attorney General at the time, John Tucker, argued that even though DCF was brought to this house, they were aware of the abuse allegations and threats made by the father, Tony Marino, against both Aiden and the child's mother, Ariana. Those allegations did not rise to the level of imminent danger required by DCF to place Aiden in temporary custody or to seek a court order removing him from his father.
So Keith McCabe, he's the attorney representing Aiden's estate, argued that DCF ignored warning signs and failed to conduct proper safety assessment before Moreno regained access to the child. So in quotes, despite the fact that DCF recognized that this was a domestic violence situation, they still never conducted that safety assessment.
Yeah. Okay. That's the excuse, I guess. And then on June 29, 2015, a family court judge dropped a temporary restraining order that had prevented Marino from contacting Aiden and his mother. DCF workers did testify that that decision heavily factored into their assessment of the child's safety. So even though they did their own investigating, their determination was made by this judge who removed the restraining order. Days later, on July 5th, 2015, Marino killed Aiden.
Wow, that is I hadn't heard about that case until we were doing the research for tonight, and that is just, I can't even believe that. And again, like, the system failed this poor little boy. Like, they just, like, what, 5 days, 6 days later, like, just crazy.
Yeah, like, I don't even know. Obviously, the father's responsible for killing the baby, but I still don't know who did what here. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
aren't these separate entities? These Department of Children and Family Services, they're different from family courts.
They are, but DCF, you do have, like, has to go to a judge at a family court before they can either put a child back in a home or remove a child. So it's DCF and the courts supposedly working together. So again, like,
Yeah.
they just they didn't do what they were supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
And it's
because then
right here that, like, even though it was a domestic violence situation, they never did a safety assessment.
that's exactly my point. Like, even if the judge says that there's not significant or sufficient evidence to support this, DCF was aware of the history here and they didn't go back. Like, that's so gross.
Yeah, it's really sad. So that brings us to our next case, which is Bella Bond. So Bella was 2.5 years old. She was from Dorchester, Massachusetts. Her murder drew national attention. She was first known to the public as Baby Doe. So her parents are Rachel Bond and Joseph Amoroso. In June 2015, a dog walker found a child's remains in a garbage bag on Deer Island. Authorities circulated a computer-generated image of the unidentified girl worldwide and labeled her Baby Doe. After nearly 3 months, DNA testing confirmed her identity to be Bella Bond, a toddler from Boston who had been missing for weeks.
And in the criminal case, prosecutors charged Rachel Bond's boyfriend, Michael McCarthy, in the killing of Bella, allegedly claiming that the child was possessed by demons. Rachel Bond was charged as an accessory after the fact, as she admitted and court evidence showed that she hid baby Bella's body temporarily in their apartment, participated in the disposal of her body, and did not report her death to authorities in 2017. A Suffolk County jury found McCarthy guilty of second-degree murder, and he received a life sentence with parole eligibility. Are you serious? After 20 years? And Rachel Bond served her time for her role and was later released.
Yeah, I can't even, again, like, I don't, she should not have been released and he should not ever have parole. Like, there's people in jail doing longer time for marijuana than they are for this poor little girl.
Yeah, they didn't just kill her. They hid her body, and then when everyone was trying to identify the body, they didn't step up. Where's the father? I want to hear from the father. I don't remember.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Who
remember.
did?
We'll keep going. The case spurred reforms within the Massachusetts Department of Children and Families, which had previously investigated the family in 2012 and 2013, both times for neglect, pattern of substance use, including heroin, unstable living arrangements. And DCF also had involvement with the mother's older children who had been removed years earlier, but they allowed Bella to remain in her mother's custody. So DCF received no formal complaint or punishment, really just criticism from the media and the public. So again, like, there was clearly a pattern here. The older kids have been removed. So, like, why are you leaving the younger one? If anything, the older ones at least had a voice. And, this poor little 2-year-old couldn't even defend herself.
Yeah, so is this like about better laws? Should there be stricter guidelines concerning, mothers who are having babies after DCF has already taken their children? I It's like Would an adoption agency give you another dog if you were charged with 2 counts of dog abuse? Like,
Well, that's
really?
a good point you bring up. Like, it's probably harder to get an animal from a shelter than it is to just have a child, and no one's monitoring that. You know what I mean? Anyone can go out and have a kid, like you said.
Yeah, and again, why was she released? She admitted to hiding the body. What kind of mother? I I, I can't. Oh God. And yet we continue with our list here. This is actually in Pembroke Pines, Florida. Melody Alana Rose Duran was a 2-year-old girl whose death in May 2024 became a widely discussed example of a domestic violence case and a family court tragedy.
So on May 28, 2024, Melody was with her father, Geronimo Duran, during an unsupervised time-sharing visit at his family's home in Pembroke Pines, Florida. Police say he killed Melody by slashing her throat. I can't even imagine 2-year-old little girl. Family members inside the home discovered the scene, called 911, and unfortunately she passed at the hospital. He was arrested and he was charged with first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse.
Melody's mother, Mona Rosita Clark, had previously warned family court about serious concerns involving Duran's mental health and behavior. Court filings reportedly describing allegations that he had a history of psychiatric hospitalizations, paranoia, suicidal ideation, violent outburst, behavior, Clark described as unstable and dangerous to both her and Melody.
So Mona had asked prior to this incident for full custody. She wanted supervised visitation, a psychological evaluation, parenting classes, and appointment of guardian ad litem for Melody. So again, we talked about the guardian ad litem before. It's someone who is like a middle person between the child and the parents. So despite the mother's concerns, the parenting agreement allowed for unsupervised visitation. And this, obviously, because of what happened, later became a focus of criticism after Melody's death.
As it should become a focus of criticism, what harm would it have been to appoint a guardian ad litem and to have supervised visitations that would allow the court-appointed party to actually see what's going on if they did not, in this case, believe the mother? In
And
most
I don't
cases,
disagree with like a psychological evaluation or parenting classes either. Like, I don't feel like that's a lot to ask in this situation where she has these concerns.
especially if there is an actual record of him having history being in psychiatric hospitals. Like, that would be warrant enough, not even like what she's saying. And
Right.
that is the hard part. And that's why the first case we mentioned, makes these cases so much harder. Because what if those kids weren't being honest, or the mother was poisoning their brains and telling them to say things like this is why judges need to sincerely listen to the mother's concern. We bring these babies into this world, with or without the man by our side. And yes, fathers should have a right to their children, but not under these conditions. Melody's case became a painful example of the argument that credible domestic violence and severe mental health risk concerns should trigger stronger child protection safeguards in all custody cases.
Absolutely. Should is the key word.
Yeah.
So another New England case was Caden. Again, I'm so bad with names. Mancuso. Caden was a 7-year-old girl from Pennsylvania. Her death in 2018 became one of the most cited U.S. custody and domestic violence tragedies. So what happened with Caden? Caden lived with her mother and her stepfather in Pennsylvania. Her parents were in a contentious custody dispute. The court allowed her father, Jeffrey Mancuso, unsupervised weekend visitation despite concerns raised by the mother and a documented history of domestic violence. In August 2018, Caden was dropped off for her weekend unsupervised visit. She was later found dead in her father's home in Philadelphia. He had also died by suicide in what police described as a murder-suicide. Reports indicate that she had been beaten to death during the incident.
That's nice. That's nice. Court and media reporting showed several key issues that made this case controversial. The father reportedly had a history of violence towards others. The mother had sought primary custody and protection. A restraining order was reportedly in place against him at points in this case. Concerns about risk were raised, but there were no prior evidence he had abused Caden directly before visitations were granted. This distinction, no prior abuse of the child, is the one reasons courts sometimes still allow contact, even when adult domestic violence history exists. Because let me just say, I want nothing more than my child to witness their father beating the shit out of me.
Yeah, again, like every situation's different, but absolutely, if there are any history of violence towards others, or especially the mother of the child, there absolutely needs to be some sort of, protocols in place to ensure the safety of the child, because it's just crazy to me that they just continue to allow, again, like unsupervised visits. So this case became nationally significant. It led to major legal and policy discussions. It highlighted, again, like we just talked about a little bit, how courts weigh past domestic violence versus child-specific abuse, the risks of unsupervised visitation in domestic violence cases, and whether shared parenting assumptions can override safety concerns. It directly contributed to reforms known as Caden's Law, which strengthened requirements for judges to prioritize child safety and consider domestic violence history more heavily in custody decisions.
Yes, and I really pray here that the judges are sincerely considering these situations when they're making these very difficult decisions, but yeah. Why people still reference this case? Advocates often cite Caden's case when discussing mothers being disbelieved or minimized in custody court, coercive coercive control not being treated as proof of danger, courts allowing contact when warning signs exist but are not legally proven against the child.
So again, this case remains one of the clearest examples used in debates on how family courts assess risk in domestic violence situations involving children. And again, like I'd like to hope that judges, are doing better with that. But with my own experiences working with domestic violence survivors and that population, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, these women and sometimes men, because I think we need to point out too that men can also be part of a domestic violence situation. The woman could be an abuser, are a lot of times forced to co-parent with their abuser or enforced to allow their children to go with their abusers unsupervised. And it's just really, really scary.
It is very scary, and I think the most important thing here is abuse comes not just physical and sexual, it also comes emotional and psychological. And if you have a family where both parents are physically assaulting each other, or if you see the mother struggling and the father has control over your mother, these situations are still abusive towards children, and children should not be allowed in unsupervised places with the parent that is leading this charge. If it's both parents, then yes, let's both parents have to sit down, go to parenting classes, have supervised visitations, have someone that's going to follow their case and not just leave things, undecided or unnoted. I'm so sick of hearing that these workers have too many cases. That has been the story for years. As old as I am, because my parents went through custody battles when I was 3 years old, that's been the excuse this whole time. So if they're not able to fix that situation, then they need to do something else. Maybe certified police officers, maybe, give incentives towards family court attorneys and have them have like a dual certification or something. To me, that cannot be the excuse while these innocent children are dying.
Agreed. There needs to be some solution.
Yeah, no more excuses. So in research, I was trying to find what was different from the 1980s to now, other than myself and Max's own personal or professional experiences working with these departments. And this is what we found. In the 1980s, courts often leaned towards mothers getting primary custody. Today, most courts start from the idea that both parents should stay involved unless there is abuse, neglect, or another serious issue.
So, since the 1980s, the best interest of the child has become more detailed. So, courts have always, claimed, we'll say, that they focused on the best interest of the child. And in the 80s, this could be more subjective. Now, states usually have specific legal factors that judges must consider. So, some of those things would be each parent's relationship with the child, stability of each home, mental and physical health of the parents, history of abuse, addiction or neglect, their ability to co-parent, and sometimes, depending on the age of the child, they could take the child's preference into consideration as well.
Which they didn't do that in the Nightmare Upstairs case because he was 16.
And again, I feel like these are all great things to consider, but this goes back to the challenges with the Department of Child and Families. So stability of each home. Okay, well, the judge isn't going out into these people's homes, so somebody else is doing that and reporting back to the judge. And how many times did we just talk about in these previous cases that didn't happen? So again, these are all great things to have in place, but there needs to be someone who's out there implementing them. Like we talked about mental and physical health of the parents. Well, we just talked about that case where the father was clearly mentally unstable, had a history of mental health, and still the mother requested a psychological evaluation and it was never done. So again,
right.
There needs to be someone out implementing these standards that we have put in place.
Yeah, and what is the point of going to family court, both parties filling out a questionnaire where you basically state your job, how often do you spend time with the kids, how much money do you make? And if you're the parent who has been raising the children and taking care of the children, and then you have the father who's been working and doesn't have to worry about taking care of the children or finding a sitter or daycare or anything like that, and then a mother gets denied because how could she possibly get a job making as much money as him where she's responsible for their childcare?
Mm-hmm.
In the 1980s, abuse allegations were often minimized or treated as private family matters. Now, courts are much more likely to order protective orders, limit or supervise visitation, consider documented abuse heavily in custody decisions. Though critics say, and I'll say, enforcement can still vary a lot by judge and state. a lot of these judges are men. A lot of these judges, you know, are in support of, well, if a man wants to be a part of his kid's life, I don't care if they're in jail for molesting their kid, we're going to make it happen.
Yep. And again, some of our research did say there was a focus on mediation instead of courtroom battles. In the 80s, custody disputes often went straight to court. Now they do require parents to do mediation first. A lot of times they require parenting classes. Again, I think that kind of goes back to what you were saying, Elle, about like caring for the child. I do think the parenting classes are a great idea, but I don't think it touches, like you said, those daily routines and that, running around. And I feel like, again, as mothers, we tend to take on more just in general when it comes to caring for the children.
Yeah, it's not just a job, or if we have full-time jobs and are still caring for the children, not many men can do that. There are some, but most of the time it is the mother that's doing that. Again, this is not like a woman show here. This is just stating the facts. So I don't want anyone
Well,
to
so
think
it's
we're just
funny. Yeah, no, I get it. We're not man bashing.
no.
So this is funny that you brought this up. So one of our past episodes, I believe we talked, and I could have memory loss, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure we talked about that show on Peacock, All Her Fault. Did we talk about that on
Oh yeah.
here?
We did not, but I remember the show.
Okay, so All Her Fault, definitely check it out on Peacock, but all I'll say, I don't want to be like spoiler, but I was watching it and this is just how my brain works because I work with families, so I tend to like just have a different lens, right? And as I'm watching it, this kind of came into my mind how disconnected they created the fathers in this show to be. So in one part in particular, they're talking about the mother hiring a nanny, and the mom and the dad are sitting there and they're being questioned by the police, and the police are asking, like, did you check references? Did you do this? Did you do that? So the mother said, yeah, I checked references, and everyone talked about how wonderful this nanny was. They sounded really great on the phone. And he's like, well, those were all made up people. And she's like, oh my goodness, like, I can't believe it. And the father turns to her and he's like, you didn't notice that they were fake people? And the police officer says, well, sir, when you called the references, did you pick up on anything? And he goes, oh, well, I didn't call. So again,
Exactly.
it kind of goes back to like what we were talking about earlier and how like it's just expected that not only the mother takes care of the child care, but we're also setting it up. We're going to the daycare or the nanny and we're checking the references and we're making sure it's a safe place. So at the end of the day, it's not really on the father. And that's kind of and that's not always true, right? That's not, oh, I don't want to like, stereotype what you said, like me and Bash. I don't think that situation's always true, but that was just something that was super interesting to me while I was watching this that came up.
But okay, so it is true in most cases, but given that theory or that intention, when you're married to somebody or if you have a baby with someone, even if it was a one night stand, most men and most women will say, well, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to work and I'll make sure that you guys have enough money to live off of. And the girl, the mother will most likely, when she's able to, get a part-time job, find someone that she trusts and cares about to take care of their child, and then eventually be in a place where they can both do this amicably. But it's the times where the separation between the two parents becomes so volatile and so dangerous that you start seeing, and I'm going to say it again, these men, these fathers that will do anything to take their anger out on you. They'll beat you up, they'll rape you, they'll do anything because they don't know better. or I shouldn't even say that they don't know better. They know better, but you are their punching bag. You've become the person that they take their stuff on. And if that doesn't break you down enough that you have the courage to go to court and say, I can't be with this person, my child and I, it's too dangerous. How dare that woman go in front of that judge and ask the judge for help? Now that man is going to, again, do whatever they can to tear you down. And that's including abusing your children or making it virtually impossible for you to have any type of control by having custody of your kids. So those are the situations that we're talking about here.
Exactly.
I know we were just talking about money. So I just remember I was like, how old was I? It was probably like a little more than 15 years ago. I had a job outside of college and it was a financial institution. I worked with like a bunch of really cool people in a call center. Um, and one day, one of the people that we worked with didn't show up for work and we couldn't figure out why. So for like 3 days, he didn't show up and the boss is like, hey, you guys heard from this guy? And we're like, no, let me look in my text and see if I can reach out. And then someone got a message that he was in jail for failing to pay child support. Now we know he has a job. We know that he still lived at his mom's house at the time. So I sincerely didn't believe that he was withholding money. I think he didn't have the money when she asked for it, so the court system locked him up until they could pay for it. Meanwhile, court fees and attorney fees and all that would start stacking up against him. And then you become put in this place where there's no return. How do you get out of it? So here's the example of these two different extremes. You have a mother that knows that the father can't come up with the money, so she's going to go and ruin his life.
Absolutely. And the child support like stacks up quick.
Yeah, especially if the government's in charge of tracking the payments, which I am all for those who aren't doing what they're supposed to do. Because back in the 80s, unpaid child support, they didn't have trackers for it. They didn't have a way to collect it. Now the government's all over it. I wonder how much money they're making off of this.
Oh, I'm sure they're probably taxing it and fees and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, they're saying that they're going to intercept the tax refunds that people get. They won't let them get their licenses, all that stuff. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it should be an all or nothing situation. I think that if you have a man that is doing everything he can for their child and records can prove that, like revise the order for that person. Don't just make it a standard for everyone, because why do most women stay with men? Because none of us can afford to live solo right now, with the
Well, and I
exception of
think
my girl,
you,
Mac.
you mentioned the different types of abuse too, and financial abuse is definitely a thing as well, where the man holds, or woman, right, because we can be men too, holds the money and controls all the money, so you can't leave because you can't, again, like you said, they don't work, they're home, they rely on this person for everything, they're not able to take care of themselves.
Right. And I'm sure a lot of that was most likely set up that way.
Absolutely. So one other thing that we found in our research between the 80s and now is courts tend to recognize more family structures. So back in the 80s, courts often assumed that a traditional family was a married mother-father household. Now they're a little more open. They're recognizing parents that have never been married, same-sex parents, parents that had assisted reproduction or surrogacy, and also grandparent visitation is actually a thing too, where grandparents can can ask for visitation, and they're just becoming more blended family friendly, we'll say.
Yes, which I think is great, especially if that's how the family starts out as, they should not be judged because they didn't fit into, you know, the image that the judge created for a family. So I like this.
Me
Uh,
too, and I feel a lot of grandparents are taking care of their grandchildren, or like primary um guardianships of their grandchildren too, so it's nice to see that they have some rights.
yes, exactly. Um, Other things that have changed since the 80s is the technology. In the 80s, it was mostly people coming forward with their own testimony. If there were any paper records and witnesses, that were brave enough to step up, or to even get involved in these very difficult situations. Now judges actually want to see technology evidence like text messages, emails, social media posts, GPS data. In some cases, they have app-based co-parenting records. So, Your Honor, this is what I did. Well, prove to me that this is what you did. Let me see it. Which to me is so reasonable, assuming that, these families have access to the type of technology that the judges are looking for.
I'm sure this is very helpful in a lot of cases to prove certain situations, and as we all know, like,
Yeah,
things can
except
sometimes get
with the
really
with the
dirty,
AI
so
stuff.
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the thing that does make me weary though is the new AI stuff that, are basically fabricating a lot of these electronic records.
Yeah, true. I didn't think about that. I'm not too savvy with the AI yet.
Yeah, some dangerous people are though.
Yeah, I'm sure. So some things that haven't changed is common criticism that family court is slow, expensive, like we've talked about throughout this episode, inconsistent between judges, and can really be emotionally draining for families, financially draining, emotionally draining. And while laws and attitudes have modernized, many people still feel outcomes depend heavily on, like we said, specific judge, lawyers, and again, like evidence presented, like Al mentioned, some maybe text messages or emails. Now it's a little bit more advanced.
Yeah, and I kind of just get the feeling, and this is probably just my own personal bias, that as much as we hope that these things have been changing, now we have all these cases in front of us that we just talked about, and that's not the case. Um, as a mother, I endured domestic violence in the past, and I've gone through the system at various different levels. And that was more than 10 years ago. I tried very hard not to cast my own opinions on this episode, but honestly, it was hard because we're expecting to see an effort, at least, in change, and I just haven't seen it. Um, During the last 10 years, we'd hope to be able to look at our justice system and see that it has evolved and corrected past mistakes. But at my desk, in my office, the jury is still out.
Yeah, I think, I'm hopeful that things are changing. Again, I think as we mentioned throughout the episode, it varies depending on judges. And I think some of the reason for that is because some judges are becoming more aware of their, biases, and maybe being more aware of these situations. I do work very closely with families that are DCF involved and families that have been through domestic violence. And again, it's like a 50-50. Sometimes you feel like things are fair and it's good, and they received, the resources and the help that they needed, and then other times you feel really defeated. So it really depends on the situation. And again, I think going back to the beginning of this episode where we talked about Ty and Bryn and how we just needed more details. I think it's really hard to sometimes pick through those details and find truth because, there's always two sides to every story, and then there's truth somewhere in the middle, and it's up to us to kind of find it, and that can be really hard.
Definitely agree with that, Max. For us, we're not the jury, we're not the judge, but we do want to talk about these cases because it's important for both moms and dads out there, that either are already have children or planning on having children. You need to know the truth. And the truth is, despite how much you think that your situation is going to be justified in front of a family court judge or by a DCF worker, or that if you show enough evidence, whether it be marks in your body, hospital visits, text messages, it doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get in front of a judge, even in this day and age, and the judge is going to help protect you and your child. Judges are people, they're humans, and a lot of them became judges for their own reasons, their own agendas. A lot of them, are part of things outside of their jobs, and that can affect the decisions that they make. There is no legal guideline for them to say, well, you've checked off this box and that box and that box. You won the prize, you get to walk away, and you and your child are safe. It doesn't work like that. So, my advice is, when you're young and you're with somebody, whether you're the guy or the girl, think about what that person would look like if down the road if you guys are parents with a child. Think about their temper. Think about, the way they look at substances like cigarettes or marijuana or just like the everyday thing. Think about things that they've said to you verbally. Think about how much independence you have or how much independence you want. Or if you're about to have a baby with a guy, can you live without them? Because so many people cannot walk away from these very dangerous situations and then end up in family courts where we're not protected. Max,
Yes.
any advice?
I don't like to give advice, but I guess I would just say, I agree with everything you said, Al, and just following your intuition. Like, if something doesn't feel right, or somebody doesn't feel right, or a situation doesn't feel right, it's probably not. So just listen to your intuition. I agree, always have like a backup plan, like a safety plan in place if anything was to happen, so that you'd be able to, be able to take care of yourself.
Yeah, it's too many, and I'm going to say it again, mothers are being stuck, left in these situations. And even if the father doesn't hurt the child, it can get very dangerous. And as strong as we think we are, we can't always endure and go through that process.
And like you said, there's so many different types of abuse. Sometimes it's a lot harder to recognize some of the abuse that's not physical. Like physical, it's easy to recognize. The kids can report it. You can see bruises, right? But the emotional, the mental, those are a little bit verbal. Those are harder sometimes to pinpoint. So you don't always know that, your child could be getting verbally or emotionally or mentally abused by someone, and you may not even know because it's so hard to sometimes pick up on that. So like I said, if something doesn't feel right or somebody doesn't feel right, listen to that, and be aware, be observant, and try to see if there's something else going on there.
Yeah, and bring your kid to the doctor.
Yes. I think that's something that again, we talked about earlier, like if you have suspicions about something, especially sexual assault or sexual abuse, that is a lot of times can be, either ruled in or out by, not always, but by an exam by a doctor.
Yeah, that's what they're there for. I mean, most of the time I've brought my kids to the pediatrician, all right, mom, you can leave, and we're gonna talk about the hard stuff. Your kids are probably gonna tell their own doctor more things that they can tell you. So why wouldn't you just bring the kid to the doctor?
You would think it would be a given, but as
I
we
know.
saw by some of these cases, that's not always what people think, I guess, of their first thought.
Yeah, like now parents are gonna question it. What age do I stop putting Desitin on my kid's butt if it has a rash? I'm like, you're their
Yeah,
parent. You should be able to do that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
All right, let's have some light at the end of this tunnel. In closing this episode, we just wanted to share a light filled quote I found for all of you, moms and dads going through it. Capture the magic in every little thing. Surround yourself with people who make your soul feel seen. Take photos, write stories, keep the memories. Do things that set your heart on fire.
Try new adventures, chase the sunset, step outside your comfort zone. If it scares you, that's a sign that you're growing. Life is short, make it magical. Don't waste a single moment. I love that. And I love the take photos. I've been trying to be in photos more because I feel like when I die, my kids aren't going to have any pictures of me.
Where were you, Mom?
So thank you everyone for coming and listening to us. And for everyone that's been listening to us, we appreciate you continuing to come back, and we will see you next time.